I want to tell you my signature story. It's a story I always tell anybody in kindergarten. It's a tradition. You know what a tradition is, right? That's something that you do to keep the world from falling down, and we wouldn't want that to be your fault. So I better tell you the story of the wide-mouthed frog. Put one hand like that, and the other hand on top like that. This is our pretend frog. And we can make him hop, and we can make him plop. We can make him go fast, hop and plop and hop and plop. And we can make him go slowly. Let's try 3 mediums. Hop, plop, stop. Good. When I do that, you can do that too. Once upon a time, there was a wide-mouthed frog. And the wide-mouthed frog sat up on a lily pad and ate flies all day. He'd never been to school, not even kindergarten. He didn't know very much. And one day, he decided to hop off of his lily pad and hop into the water and swim. Over to the bank, he would climb up on the big dirt road and hop around the world and see what he could see. So away he went, hopped and plopped, and hopped and plopped, and hopped and plopped, till he stopped. He stopped because right there behind a barbed wire fence standing next to the road was the strangest thing he had ever seen. It had 4 big legs, black and white blotches all over it, 2 big horns poking out the front, and a big long tail hanging off the back. And when he spoke to it, it said, "Moo. Good morning, Mrs. Cow. I am the wide-mouthed frog." The cow said good morning. He'd never talked to a real live cow before, so he decided to ask her a question. "What do you feed your babies?" The cow thought for a minute, and then she said, "Well, I feed my babies milk." "Oh, that's nice," said the wide-mouthed frog. "Thank you very much." And he hopped away. Hopped and plopped and hopped and plopped and hopped and plopped till he stopped. Because on the other side of the road, right behind a split rail fence, was another strange-looking thing. It had 4 legs, but it wasn't a cow. Short brown hair all over it, long hair hanging down its neck, and a ponytail hanging off the back. "Good morning, Mrs. Horse. I am the wide-mouthed frog." The horse said good morning. He'd never talked to a real live horse either. He had to ask her his question. "What do you feed your babies?" The horse thought for a minute, and then she said, "Well, I feed my babies hay." "Oh, that's nice," said the wide-mouthed frog. "Thank you very much." And he hopped away. Hopped and plopped and hopped and plopped and hopped and plopped till he stopped. Right there in the middle of the road, there was a bump with a head and 2 legs poking out the front of the bump and a tail and 2 legs poking out the back of the bump, and it moved very, very slowly. "Good morning, Mrs. Turtle. I am the wide-mouthed frog." The turtle said good morning. He'd never stopped long enough to talk to a turtle before. Perfect time to ask his question. "What do you feed your babies?" The turtle thought for a minute. Actually, turtles think very slowly, so she thought for another minute. And finally she said, "Well, I feed my babies worms." "Oh, that's nice," said the wide-mouthed frog. "Thank you very much." And he hopped away. Hopped and plopped and hopped and plopped and hopped and plopped till he stopped. He stopped at the end of the road right by the river, and laying on the riverbank was this big, long, green, humpity-bumpity thing with 4 short, stubby legs, a long, pointy tail, and hundreds of snaggle-aggly teeth. "Good morning, Mrs. Alligator. I am the wide-mouthed frog." The alligator said good morning. He'd never talked to a gator before. Perfect time for asking his question. What do you feed your babies? The alligator smiled a big toothy grin and she said, I feed my babies wide mouth frogs.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you very much.
And that was the end of that. I want to tell you a story from Germany that's just a little bit scary. Once upon a time, there was a mama goat, and she had 7 goat kids. And she named her goat kids Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. One day, the mama goat said, kids. She always said kids because she didn't want to have to all the time say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Kids, I'm going to take a basket on my arm and trip-trap to the market and buy each one of you a special treat. You stay here in our little cottage in the woods and keep the door locked because the big, bad wolf is about. And remember, behave. Well, the goat kids remembered their mother's advice all about behave and locking the door. They locked the door tight, waved goodbye through the window to their mama, and then they had fun, running around and jumping over the furniture and butting heads. It didn't take long before they forgot all about behave. All of a sudden, their play was interrupted by a knock, knock, knock. A voice on the other side of the door said, Little goat kids, it's me, your mother. I have a basket full of treats for you. Let me in. But those goat kids weren't fooled. They knew that wasn't their mother. One of the goat kids said, No, you're not our mother. Our mother has a sweet, soft voice. You're not our mother. You're the big, bad wolf. Go away. So the wolf went away and he searched round and round until he found a piece of chalk. He gobbled up the chalk and swallowed it down, and that softened his voice. He went back to the little cottage in the woods and he knocked on the door and he said, Little goat kids, it's me, your mother. I have a basket full of treats for you. Let me in. But then the wolf made the mistake of putting his big black paws in the windowsill that he might pull himself up and see his supper running to the door. And one of the goat kids saw those black paws and said, No, you're not our mother. Our mother has a white hoof. You're the big, bad wolf. Go away. So the wolf went away to the baker. And he said to the baker, I hurt my paw, and I need some sort of a bandage. And the baker wrapped bread dough all around the wolf's paw. And then he went to the miller, and he said, Sprinkle some white flour on this bread dough. But the miller said, I certainly will not. You're the big bad wolf, and you're up to something. If you don't do it, I'll eat your wife and children. All right. And he changed his mind. He shouldn't have done it. But some people are just like that. After the wolf had his white, doughy paw, he went back to the little cottage in the woods, and he knocked on the door, and he said, Little goat kids, it's me, your mother. See my white hoof in the window? I have a basket of treats for you. Let me in. Well, that sounded like their mother's sweet, soft voice. And it looked like her white hoof in the window. And so the goat kids happily ran to the door. They lifted the latch, the door swung open wide, and all of a sudden, it was terrible. He gobbled up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but he missed Sunday goat. Sunday goat had jumped into the big grandfather clock case where he was well hidden. And there he stayed until the big bad wolf went away. When the mama goat came home, she saw the door of the cottage flung open. The room was a mess. Her goat kids were gone, and she started to cry. But then Sunday goat jumped out of the clock case and told his mother what had happened, and she said, There may be hope for us yet. And the mama goat went trip-trap, 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 trip-trap down the path into the dark forest, where she found the wolf asleep under a bush. his stomach very swollen. She reached into her basket and pulled out a pair of sewing scissors, and very quickly she cut a hole in the side of the wolf's stomach. And as soon as she had cut him open, out popped Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The wolf was so greedy, he had swallowed them all whole. So they were all right. Now, said the mama goat, we have to trick this wolf and make him think you're still in his stomach. And so the little goats all ran around and they gathered heavy stones. They lifted up the stones and they pushed them into the wolf's stomach. And then the mama goat took a needle and thread and stitched him right back up. She was such a good seamstress, you could hardly even tell. And then all the goats went trip, 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 home and locked the door. When the wolf awoke, he said, "Ugh, something rattling around on my insides. Feels like I swallowed a sack full of stones. Must be those goat kids and the rattling of their bones. I need a drink of water." And when he stood up, the heavy stones rattling around on his insides pulled him to the right. Oh! He took a couple stumbling steps, and the stones pulled him to the left. Oh! He went down to the river to take a drink of water, and when he bent over the river, the heavy stones shifted, and they drug him down. Oh! Splash! And he was drowned. And that was the end of that. Sometimes when I tell that story, boys and girls say, "Again, tell it again." But I don't like to tell the same story over and over and over in the very same way. But I can tell you that story again, only a little bit different. I have something to show you. In my pocket, I have this thing. It's called a kazoo. It sounds like this. I think it sounds like a bug. I have stuff I can put on it. Look at this. I have this little attachment. Now it's a trumpet. Oh, I have another thing I can put on it. Look at this. I put this on. It's my overhead cam. Now I can play race car. Here goes the car around the track. You know what else? I can make Charlie Brown teacher talk. You know the Charlie Brown cartoons? You know how the teacher always talks like, I can tell whole stories in Charlie Brown teacher talk. You want me to show you? All right. Let's see if you can understand what I'm saying. Of course. Once upon a time. There you go. See? You're fluent in Charlie Brown teacher talk. I'm going to tell you the story of 7 goat kids again, only all in kazoo language or Charlie Brown teacher talk. Here's a story from Brazil called The Monkey and the Bananas. Once upon a time, there was a little old lady in Brazil. She had a lovely garden behind her home. On one side, she had many flowers, and on the other side, she had lots of vegetables. And of course, being Brazilian, she had across the back of her garden a whole row of banana trees. At the right time of year, those trees grew big stalks of bright yellow bananas, so many bananas that the woman couldn't even eat them all. She would take the bananas to the market and sell them for money. But this little old lady, she was very bent, and she walked with a cane and stooped over. It was going to be very hard this season for her to climb up into those banana trees and pull down the bananas. But one day, while she was out in her garden, she saw a big brown monkey swinging through the trees of the jungle just beyond her garden, and she thought, "Oh, that monkey would be a good helper for me. He could pull down those bananas easy as could be." And she called out to the monkey, "La la 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 la," and the monkey came swinging through the trees of the jungle, and he landed with a plop in the garden. And the lady struck a bargain with him. She told him that if he would pull down all the bananas, for payment she would give him half. Well, monkeys love bananas, so he climbed right up into the trees and started snapping down bananas and throwing them down to the old woman. But monkeys are very greedy. He kept all the nice big yellow bananas for himself, and he threw down to the old woman short, green, hard bananas that weren't ripe yet, or ones that were all black and speckled and mushy on the inside. She didn't have anything. That night, that old lady went into her house, and she sat down, and she started to think. She was going to figure out how to teach that thieving monkey a lesson. Then she rose up from her thinking, because she knew exactly what she was going to do. She walked all around her house, and she gathered many, many candles. Big, fat candles, long, skinny candles, little short birthday candles. She plopped them all into a pot and set it up on her cooking stove, and in a little while, all the candles melted. And then she poured the wax onto a board, and after the wax had cooled a bit, she started to push the wax and smush the wax and mold it until she had made herself a statue, a little wax boy. She put some blue shorts on him and a bright red shirt, and the next morning she walked to the market and she bought a basket full of bananas with her money. And she placed the basket of bananas on the boy's head. And then she set the statue out in front of her house, right next to the road, and watched from the window to see what would happen. In a little while, the big brown monkey came swooping through the trees of the jungle, and all of a sudden, hanging from a vine, he stopped. He looked down there on the road, and he saw what looked like a boy carrying a basket full of bananas. He let go of the vine from which he was swinging, and he landed with a plop right in the middle of the road, and he looked at the little statue and he said, "Hey boy, how about you give me a banana?" Of course, the wax boy didn't say anything. He was a statue. He couldn't talk. And the monkey asked again, and he said, "Come on, boy, just one. Share, please. Give me a banana." Well, the wax boy didn't move. He wasn't real. He couldn't say anything. Well, when the wax boy didn't answer, it hurt the monkey's feelings. And all of a sudden he said, "Wax boy, if you don't give me a banana, I'm going to sock you in the head." Well, the wax boy didn't move, and so the monkey balled up his little fist, and he socked the statue right in the side of the head. And when he did, his hand sank into the soft wax, and it got stuck there. "You let go of me, boy! You let go, or I'll hit you again." The wax boy didn't say anything, and so the monkey hit him again. Whack! "You let go, boy! You let go, or I'll kick you with my foot." The wax boy didn't move a muscle, didn't even raise a hand to defend himself, and the monkey kicked him hard. Whoa! He was all sucked up in that wax. Well, all the other monkeys heard him screaming, and they came swinging through the jungle. They jumped down into the road, and they gathered round their friend. They wanted to help him, but they weren't sure what to do about it. Whenever monkeys get themselves into a sticky situation, they form a committee to discuss it. Finally, the oldest monkey in the tribe said he knew what to do. He sat down in the road like this. And another monkey climbed on top of his head and sat down like this. And then another monkey climbed on top of those two and sat down like this. And they just kept stacking themselves up until finally the last monkey was so high up in the sky he could talk to the sun. He told the sun their problem, and the sun started to shine very brightly. When the sun was so hot, all of the wax melted right out of the monkey's fur, and he was free from the trap. All the monkeys climbed up into the trees and went swinging off through the jungle, and they never came back to bother that old lady or her bananas ever again. Now I'm going to tell you a story that comes from Pakistan. I heard stories from Pakistan for the first time from my classmate when I was in high school. I had a friend named Jamila who grew up in Pakistan. She came to America with her family and went to high school with me, and she used to tell us fun stories and sing us fun songs from her home country. A long time ago, there was a sultan, like a king. And this sultan had 7 strong sons, but only one beautiful daughter. One day, the king called his royal servant to him, and he said, "My daughter is going to be married, and I want her to have the most marvelous wedding anyone has ever seen. I want her to wear the finest silk robes. I want her to have the most beautiful golden sandals. I want her to have lots and lots of jewels. I want her to have jewels hanging from her ears. I want her to have jewels draped around her neck. I want her to have jewels on her wrists, jewels around her ankles. I even want her to have a beautiful jewel in her nose. So I'm going to send you far away to China to collect all of these marvelous things, and then you must bring them straight back so that we can prepare for my daughter's wedding." Well, the servant promised that he would not fail, and he went out to the barn and he selected the largest camel from the sultan's herd. He climbed up on the big humpy back of the camel and he tapped the camel with a stick, and away they went over the dunes of sand in the desert. Boom chicka doom chicka boom chicka doom chicka boom chicka doom chicka boom chicka doom. And finally, they arrived in China. The servant bought all of the wonderful things that the sultan had ordered. He bought many silk robes, and he put them in a special box. He bought all kinds of golden sandals, and he put them into a sack. And then he bought many jewels. He bought rubies and diamonds and pearls and emeralds, and he put all of the jewels into a treasure chest. He stacked all of these things up on the camel's back. Then he climbed on top of the stack, and he tapped the camel with a stick, and they started for home. Boom chicka doom chicka boom chicka doom chicka boom chicka doom. But it was a very long journey. And so when night fell, the servant had to find a place to pitch a tent and camp. He pitched a tent. He unrolled a big Persian rug inside. He carried in all of the marvelous treasures. And then the servant lay down on the rug and went sound asleep. Now the camel was outside of the tent, curled up on his knees, trying to get comfortable for the night. And it was very cold. In the daytime, a desert can be very hot, but when the sun goes down and the wind starts to blow, it can get very cold indeed. And the camel was shivering and shaking. And finally the camel said, "Master, oh master, I carried a heavy load for you all the livelong day, and it's very cold out here. May I please put my head in the tent?" And the servant woke up and said, What's that? "Oh, your head? Yeah, you can put your head in the tent." And the servant went back to sleep. So the camel thrust his big head inside of the tent. That was nice. Now his head was very warm. But the rest of him was still out there in the cold. And so the camel said, "Master, oh master, I carried a heavy load for you all the livelong day, and it's very cold. May I put my neck in the tent?" And the servant woke up and said, "What's that? Your neck? Well, it is attached to your head. I suppose that's a reasonable request. You may put your neck in the tent." And he went back to sleep. Well, the camel put his big long neck into the tent. That was much better. Now his head and his neck were nice and warm and comfortable. But his legs were still out there in the cold. "Master, oh master, I carried a heavy load for you all the livelong day. My legs are out in the cold. May I please put them in the tent?" What's that? Yeah, put your legs in the tent. Just whatever. So the camel thrust all 4 of his legs in the tent. Now his head and his neck and his legs were in the tent. But his hump, the big hump, was still out there in the cold, and that was the part that made him a camel. Mister, what? My hump is out in the cold. Can I please put your hump in the tent and stop waking me up? And so the camel scooched round so that now his head, his neck, all 4 of his legs, and even his big hump were all squeezed into the tent. It was nice and comfortable, except for his butt. Master, oh master, I carried a heavy load for you all the live long day. Can I please put my butt in the tent? Stop saying butt. That's rude. Put your butt in the tent and be quiet. I'm trying to sleep. Now the camel had his whole self in the tent, but it was very crowded. And so the camel pushed with his front feet, and he pushed the sack carrying all the golden sandals right out into the wind, and the wind whoosh, blew them away. And then he pushed with his hind feet, and he pushed the box full of silks out into the wind, and the wind whoosh, blew them away. And then he flopped over and he hit the big treasure chest with his hump, and he pushed it right out into the wind, and the wind whoosh, blew sand over it so that it was buried and could never be found again. And then finally he pushed with his nose, and he pushed the servant right out into the elements. In the morning when the servant woke up, he was laying on the ground shivering and shaking with cold, and the camel was all stretched out inside of the tent very comfortable. And all of the wonderful treasures were lost. Well, the servant climbed up on the camel's back, and he tapped it with a stick, and they traveled boom chicka boom chicka boom chicka boom all the way home. And when he came to see the Sultan, he bowed very low until his forehead was nearly touching the ground, and he said, "O great Sultan, may you live 1,000 years, and may you have mercy upon me, but I fear I have lost all of the treasures that you sent me to get." And the Sultan said, "You lost them? What happened?" And he said, "Well, you see, I pitched a tent for a camp, and in the middle of the night the camel put his head, and then his neck, and then his legs, and then his hump, and even his butt into the tent. There was not enough room, and he pushed all of the treasures out, and the wind blew them away. I fear they are lost forever." The Sultan grew very angry, and he said, "I should have your head for this, but as I am a man of mercy, I will let you live. But you must return to China and buy all of those things again at your own expense, and you've learned a valuable lesson. Now you know why our people always say, 'Never let the camel get his head in the tent.'" We've been all around the world with stories, but we started with a good old American folk tale, The Wide-Mouthed Frog. And so I want to come back to our home here in the United States of America and tell you an Appalachian folk tale. Once there was this mammy and this pappy, and they had 'em 2 young'uns, a real purty little girl and a feisty little boy. Now, they lived way out in the woods, way across Pine Mountain, where they didn't have no telephone, no television, nothing like that. So for entertainment, that pappy had caught a little gray squirrel. And he set that squirrel up on the shelf above the fireplace, and that squirrel was real entertaining to them 2 young'uns of his. And they'd sit there and watch that squirrel running back and forth, chittering and chattering, frisking its tail, and that was a lot of fun for them. Well, one night, the mammy, while they was sitting there watching that squirrel, she said, "I think I'm going to make us a pan full of biscuits for our supper. Come here, feisty little boy." The little boy run over to his mammy, and she said, "Now, I want you to go to the store and buy me a box of Sody Sallyratus." That's what old folks a long time ago used to call baking soda. You know what baking soda is. It's a white powder. Your mama puts a little bit of it in the biscuit dough. It'll make your biscuits rise up big as a cat's head. She got some money and she put it down that boy's hand. She said, "Now run off to the store and get me a box of Sody Sallyratus, and don't be a lollygagging next to the side of the road. You come right back with that, you hear?" So that little boy, he run off down the road. He's running real fast. He's going whippity-cut, 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 whippity-cut. He whipped and cut right into the store, slapped that money down, and the store man gave him a box of Sody, and he headed for home. Whippity-cut, whippity-cut, whippity-cut. Well, he come to a big old humpback bridge over the river, you know the one, and when he got to the top of that humpback bridge, he had no way of knowing it, but there's a big old black bear denned up underneath that bridge, and all of a sudden that bear come a running out and said, "Ah, I heard you whippity-cutting across the top of my bridge. I'm going to eat you up, you and your box of Sody Sallyratus." Blah, 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 blah. Gobbled him right up. Well, back at the house, they's all waiting for that young'un to come home. When he didn't come, that mammy, she said, "I bet he stopped off the side of the road to play. Come here, pretty little girl. I want you to go to the store and fetch your brother home. Now hurry along. I need that box of Sody Sallyratus." So that little girl, she lit out. She is wearing her dancing shoes. When she run along, her shoes was going tip-ty-tap, 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 tip-ty-tap. She tip-tapped into the store, asked a storeman about her brother, and he said, "Oh yeah, he's in here. That's about a half hour ago. You don't reckon he stopped off the side of the road to play?" Well, she gonna find out. And out she went, tip-ty-tap, tip-ty-tap, tip-ty-tap. She tip-tapped to the top of that big old humpback bridge, and that old bear come running out, and he said, "Ah, I heard you tip-tapping across the top of my bridge. I done ate up that feisty boy, him and his box of Sody Sallyratus, and now I'm gonna eat you too." Blah, 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 blah. And he gobbled her up. Well, back at the house, that mammy and the pappy, they's a-setting in chairs a-looking at each other, and finally the mammy, she said, "Do you reckon?" And the pappy said, "Yep, I reckon. Them young'uns has stopped off the side of the road to play, and we ain't got that box of baking soda and can't make us no biscuits." And that mama jumped up and she said, "I got me a good mind to dust somebody's britches." And she went out and broke down a limb, and she started off down the road just filled with righteous indignation. Whippity-cut, swishty-swish, swishty-swish, whippity-cut, swishty-swish. She switched right into the store, asked that store man about her young'uns, and he said, "Oh yeah, they's both in here. That's about an hour ago. You don't reckon they stopped off the side of the road to play?" Or she gonna find out. Out she went. Whippity-cut, swishty-swish, swishty-swish, swishty-swish. She switched right to the top of that bridge, and that old big black bear come a-running out and said, "Ah, I heard you switching across the top of my bridge. I done ate up that purty girl. I ate up the feisty boy, him and his box of Sody Sallyratus, and I'm gonna eat you too." Blah, 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 blah. Well, back at the house, there was that pappy. When his woman didn't come home to cook him no supper, he got up his walking stick and he started off toward the store. Hunched-y-womp, 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 hunched-y-womp. He hunched and womped in the store. He asked the storeman about his family, and the storeman said, "Oh yeah, they's all in here. That's about an hour and a half ago. You don't reckon they all stopped off the side of the road to play?" Well, he gonna find out. Out he went. Hunched-y-womp, hunched-y-womp, hunched-y-womp. He come the top of that bridge. You know as good as me. Are you ready? Let's make the sound of that big old bear together. Blah! That bear come out, and it said, "I done ate up the old woman. I ate up the purty girl. I ate up the feisty boy, him and his box of Sody Sallyratus, and now I'm gonna eat you too." Blah, 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 blah. Gobbled him right up. Well, back at the house, there wasn't nobody there, except in that squirrel that was a-running back and forth across the top of the shelf above the fireplace. And that squirrel jumped down off the shelf and went out the front door with its tail a-frisking along behind him. Fristy-frisk, 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 fristy-frisk. Frisked right into the store, jumped up on the counter, and asked that storeman. That storeman said, "Oh yeah, they's all in here. That's about 2 hours ago. You welcome." That squirrel lit out. Fristy-frisk, fristy-frisk, fristy-frisk. Come the top of that bridge, and that old bear said, "Bah! I ate up the old man. I ate up the old woman. I ate up the purty girl, and I ate up the feisty boy, him and his box of Sody Sallyratus, and now I'm gonna eat you too." But then that squirrel took a jump and landed on the side of a tree and skittered right up to the top of that tree, and that old bear started to climb up the tree right behind him. The squirrel run out on a tree limb, and that bear come out after him. And then that squirrel took a flying leap and jumped out of that tree, crossed the road, and into the next tree. And that old bear said, "If you can stretch out over to that next tree on your little legs, I know I can do it on my great big uns." And when that bear stretched himself, he missed the other tree branch, and he come right down in the middle of the road. Whomp! And 'cause he had eaten that baking sody, and it had bloated him up so, he busted wide open. Out come the pappy, and the mammy, the girl, and the boy, and they all went home, baked up a big pan of biscuits. That squirrel ate 2 of them biscuits before it was filled up, and that was the end of that.